In this lesson, we're going to be discussing setting up new documents. If you'd like to follow along, go into your welcome screen under Create New and click on Document. Or you can go under File, New, Document. In the window that opens, if it doesn't look like this, click Fewer Options. What Adobe is doing here is various options that are not used quite as much are hidden by default. The good news is, once you click More Options, Bleed and Slug down the bottom of the window will always be open and available. Why don't we start at the very top of this window, Document Preset. What this is about is, let's say there's a certain size newsletter that I'm always creating, and it always has exactly the same settings throughout this entire dialog window. Rather than go through the dialog each and every time, I'm going to save a preset. There's a Save Preset button, and if I click on that, it allows me to name the preset and click OK. I'm going to hit Cancel, but if I had hit Save, the document preset would now be listed in this pop-up menu. The next section is totally new in CS5. It says Intent. By default, the intent is print, which means if I leave it this way, it's going to be a CMYK document and everything is going to be in my default units that I've set up, in this case, inches. But if I were to choose instead web, it's going to make it an RGB document, and all of the sizes will now be listed in pixels. I'm going to go back to print from the pop-up. Number of pages. I can actually set up a certain number of pages right from the get-go just by typing a number in here. I'm going to type 8. Start page numbering, and it says 1, which is usually what you're going to want. But if you wanted to start your page numbering at, let's say, 7, you could do that. Facing pages, what that is about is, let's say I wanted to design my master pages in spreads. I would check Facing Pages. Now, we haven't talked about master pages yet, but we will be in an upcoming lesson. Master text frame. That too has to do with master pages. And if I was bringing in long text from Microsoft Word, I would want to check this. And what it would do is when the text from the Word document comes in, InDesign will automatically flow the text from page to page to page, and it will add as many pages as are necessary to contain all of the text. Page size. Let me click down on that pop-up menu where it says Letter, and you'll see that there are certain standard sizes for the United States or Europe, a couple of more sizes that may be used once in a while depending on what kind of a business you have, and then a bunch of web sizes which are in pixels. I'm going to stick with letter, but let's say instead of the exact 8.5 by 11 letter size, I wanted to increase the width. I could do that by clicking the up arrow next to the width field, and with each click it's going to add another 1/16 of an inch. The number will actually go to the next available 1/16 of an inch. So let me just click the down arrow to go back to 8.5. Now if I wanted to increase the height, I would click the up arrow. If I wanted to decrease the height, I could click the down arrow. Orientation. By default, it is using portrait, which means, of course, that it is taller than it is wide. But if I were to click the landscape button, it's going to switch the width and the height. So it's the same size page, but just going the other direction. I'm going to click portrait to get back to my standard 8.5 by 11 page. And the next area is columns. The number of columns, you can actually specify it by typing a number in the number field. Or I can click the up arrow. So if I wanted 2 columns, I would click up once. Gutter, that is the space between the columns. If I click the up arrow, it's going to go to the next available 1/16 of an inch. If I click it again, it's going to add another 1/16 of an inch. I'm going to leave it at 1 column. Now, what this column area does is add column guides. But if I had a master text frame, if that was checked, it would have the master text frame with the number of columns that I specify here. Margins, that's the area around the outside of your page that is like a safe area. You're setting up a safe area inside of your margins. And what I mean by that is an area that anything that's important, like for instance your headline or your logo or body text, it would never be outside of the margins because there's a possibility it might get cut off. It also gives you air around the outside of your layout, which is always a good thing. In the bleed and slug area, bleed is something that you add to the outside of your trim. What is that about? Well, let's say I have a background that I want to go right off the page, right to the trim. Well, if I ended my background, or maybe it's an image of some kind that's being used as a background, if I ended it right at the trim, the chances of it actually being cut there in the finished printed piece is highly unlikely. So rather than having the possibility of a white slither right next to my trim, because it didn't cut it exactly in the right place, I'm going to add a bleed. I'm going to select the top bleed and click my up arrow twice, which is going to add 1/8 of an inch, 0.125 inches. And because this little link icon is highlighted, it's going to do the same thing on all sides of my layout. Slug, what is that about? Well, the slug area is used for information that you may not want printed all the time. Maybe when it goes to press, you're not going to want it to be printed. But if you did, you could add a slug area. Let me just select bottom, and there are no up or down arrows here. But if I select the bottom number in the field and click my up arrow on my keyboard, it's going to act exactly like the arrows do next to margins. So let me increase this number to 1 inch. I don't have to type the space and the IN after it because InDesign knows that I'm working in inches. Let me just click at another field and you're going to see that in the bottom slug area, it's adding that IN for inches. Now you can see how much time it actually took to go through all the specifications in this dialog window, which is why if you're planning on using a document with these same specs, again, click on Save Preset so it's available in the Document Preset area. And I'm just going to click OK, and you're going to see that it actually is setting up a document with 8 pages. Let me go to my Pages panel and just click, and you can see that there's a pages 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, and it is adding my bleed on every single spread and also a slug area that goes along the entire bottom. We're going to be talking more about the Pages panel in an upcoming lesson.